In a world that moves too fast, this is your invitation to pause, to explore the space between thought and wonder, where science meets story and emotion meets insight. Here, curiosity is more than a question. It's a way of being. You found your corner of calm and contemplation. This is nerdy psychology. Stay curious, be kind, and keep your mind nerdy.
A lot of people think growth should feel empowering, but most of the time, growth actually feels like fear, self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, or grief for who you used to be, and a strong urge to make that U-turn and turn back. And people often assume that means they're failing or that they're doing something wrong, but it actually means something inside of you is reorganizing. Hi nerds, if you're new here, I'm Dr. Angel, a mental health professional and the creator of Nerdy Psychology, where we talk about mental health with honesty, depth, and practical tools, not pressure to get it right. This month, our Food for Thought Fridays has been inspired by Brené Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart. Today, we're closing out this series by talking about those emotions that show up right before real change takes hold. Over the past few weeks, we have talked about naming our emotions accurately, shame and secrecy, vulnerability, trust, and safe connection. So it makes sense that the final stop is growth, because growth is where all of us gets tested. Fear is usually the first emotion people notice during growth. And fear doesn't mean stop. Fear usually means something meaningful is shifting in your life. Fear shows up when the nervous system is leaving what's familiar, even when familiar isn't healthy. Okay, I want you to picture this. Someone has done real work. They've set boundaries. They've stopped over-explaining. They've started listening to themselves. They began choosing differently in healthy ways. And from the outside, that looks like growth. But internally, on the inside, they feel less certain, not more confident. They feel weaker, not stronger, lonely in ways they didn't expect to feel. And they start thinking, was I doing better before? Maybe I made a mistake. Or at least I knew who I was back there. This moment is where many people, they turn back, not because growth wasn't working, but because the old identity was familiar. And what they're actually grieving isn't failure. They're grieving the version of themselves who survived by adapting. Brené Brown reminds us that courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen. But here's the quieter truth. Courage is often just staying present when everything in you wants to retreat back in. And growth rarely feels like confidence. It feels like pausing instead of reacting, or choosing discomfort over self-betrayal, sitting with uncertainty without rushing to fix it. And that, my friends, that is courage. Hope doesn't usually sound like everything will work out, or hope sounds more like, I don't know what's next, but I know I can stay with myself through it. Hope is what keeps people engaged during the messy middle, when the outcomes aren't clear yet. So you aren't where you were, but you're not where you're trying to go. So you're still stuck in that middle space. This is the emotion that determines whether growth becomes healing or just another way to judge yourself. Self-compassion says, this is hard. And this makes sense. And without self-compassion, fear turns up its ugly head into self-criticism. And discomfort turns into shame. Growth can turn into burnout. And with self-compassion, growth becomes integrated into who we are, not forced. Growth emotions often include fear, uncertainty, vulnerability, hope, and sadness for what's ending. And when people name these emotions instead of resisting them, they stop interpreting discomfort as danger. So here's the thought line of this entire series. When you name emotions, bring shame into the light, practice safe connections, and respond to growth with compassion, you're not fixing yourself, you're learning how to stay present within your inner world. That's not self-improvement, that's self-trust. And that is exactly where my workbook focuses so much on emotional language and self-compassion, not to push growth faster, but to help it land gently. Growth doesn't need pressure, it needs support. I've also created the emotion check-in guide that is meant for moments just like this, when you're unsure whether what you're feeling is a setback or a sign of progress. It helps you name growth-related emotions, understand what are they signaling inside of you, and choose responses rooted in care, not fear. And I'll link that below in the description. So here's your final food for thought. If growth feels uncomfortable, ask, what part of me is being asked to change? And what part needs reassurance? Discomfort doesn't mean stop. Sometimes it means stay. If this series has resonated with you, please hit the like and subscribe button so that you can be a part of our growing community. And I invite you to reflect in the comments if you would like. What emotion shows up for you when you're growing? Thank you for watching through Food for Thought Fridays and Atlas of the Heart with me. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're becoming more honest with yourself. And that takes courage. Until next time, be curious, stay kind, and keep your mind nerdy. That's a wrap. See you next week.
You found your corner of calm and contemplation. This is nerdy psychology. Stay curious, be kind, and keep your mind nerdy.